Hello, everyone. Welcome to 2022, the Ongoing Biennial Conversation Cycle. My name is Pedro Lasch. I'm an artist and director of the lab. So today we have the great honor to have Gabi Ngcobo with us today. Thank you so much, Gabi, for joining us. I will formally introduce you in a moment. But also thank you to Nzinga Simmons, who is going to be the respondent for today. Nzinga has curated a great show called Unbound about abstraction and Black art and contemporary art, but she's also currently pursuing a PhD here at Duke University. So I look forward to our conversation. And Gabi Ngcobo is an artist, a curator, and an educator. She is currently based in Johannesburg. And she's in a 20 years or so curatorial trajectory. She has worked on several biennials, including she was a co-curator of the 32nd Sao Paulo Bienal, most recently the 10th Berlin Biennale, and as well as Cape Town Biennale in 2007. So we will touch on all of those, but Gabi also is heavily involved in theoretical work, like research, scholarship, publications, as well as an artist herself, you know? So I think, Gabi, one reason I'm particularly excited today is you're in our series. You're not our only artist in the series who also curates, but you're the first one who presents, you know? So hopefully that's a topic we can really discuss today as well. If it's okay with you, maybe we can start with the biennial part and then move into your longer trajectory. And so, of course, we could address the Berlin Biennale, which you provocatively named, We Don't Need Another Hero. So maybe we can start by thinking about how that title reflected on the artists that you chose and the strategies that you took. But I'm fascinated personally also by the history of the Cape Town Biennial. And I don't know how much you want to talk about it, because it was quite fascinating, right? Not only because it was preceded by Johannesburg Biennial, which is one of the most important. It's one of those examples of a star shining so strong, but then, you know, disappearing. And so I don't know if you want to put them in a particular order or how much you would like to say about each one, but I'd love to hear from those two at the very least.
Well, thank you very much, Pedro, and thanks for the invitation. I have been waiting for this day for quite some time, and it's finally here. I'm really happy to share. I think just to start off, I have been, you know, I did not see the Johannesburg Biennale. I was back in Durban. I couldn't come for both of them. So they, the first one was in 1995, and then the second one was in 97. Actually, in 97, with a student group from my university, we took a bus from Durban, which is a 7-hour trip, to come and see the Johannesburg Biennale, only to find that it was closed, or it had been closed by the city of Johannesburg because it was too expensive to keep open. So it's kind of a story that fascinates me, you know, like things that I miss. They kind of fascinate me. And so when me and two colleagues started CHR, the Center for Historical Reenactments, in 2010, I was thinking very much about especially the second Johannesburg Biennale and its memory, and how it lives in different people's memory. You can go to Mexico, you can go to Cuba, you can go, you know, to Finland, anywhere. And I started to notice that I was when I was invited for conferences, for speaking, that there's always going to be somebody in the audience who's going to ask me about the Johannesburg Biennale. But also they are artists of a particular generation, they're in their 50s now, who were in Johannesburg in 1997. It's very common to meet people who said, I have been to Johannesburg in 97. And of course, that is always the connection. So there was a lot of promise, you know, a lot of people seeing that as a kind of like next a destination to, you know, to come to experience a biennale in the southernmost point of the continent, and maybe of the world. And so it, you know, it kind of became a kind of a platform to pose questions, to return to certain questions that were asked then, to return to things that were left over, and, you know, also to think about it as a phantom pain, as a phantom limb syndrome, something that kind of lingers when people talk of a good time, a better time, or a promising time. So with the Center for Historical Reenactments, one can say somehow that we were also thinking about that moment in South Africa's history, not as a way to question whether we need a biennale to come back or not, but to kind of see what happens if we repose those questions, if the answers become different, or if they activate other questions of that time. So when I was asked to be one of the curators of the Cape 07, whose kind of tagline was "not another biennale," and, you know, it was also kind of fascinating. It was a very ambitious project. I was very nervous. I mean, still kind of younger in my practice. And there were big plans, and it was happening in Cape Town, which is a very different city to Johannesburg. And I was living in Cape Town at the time. And I think the experience of working at Cape for Cape 07, which was going to be Cape 06, and then it got moved for financial reasons, which never really went away, even with Cape 07. So it was a big learning platform for me, because we really, at some point, the artistic director who was appointed left, and my co-curator Kwezi Gule left as well. So I was left alone, because it became clear that all our plans for the Biennale could not be realized. There was just no money. And so I was the one kind of like left to call the artists and say, it's not happening, or, you know, but instead of canceling it, we tried to kind of scale it down, to rethink, you know, to be more creative about funding opportunities. And it kind of did mean that an artist who was based in Zimbabwe, just across the border, could not come, but an African artist living in London could come, because the British Council could help with that. So it was a challenge in many ways, and of course working with artists who are based in South Africa. So instead of, I can't remember how many artists we had planned for, but more than 100, we ended up having about 40, kind of dispersed in different parts of the city and the township, which was called Khayelitsha. So for me, it became like a really big learning process, like how to work with, I don't know if to call it failure, you know, it was, you know, kind of working on your toes, and trying to pull strings, and also, you know, experiencing the generosity of artists who just said, listen, we'll make it happen, you know, and galleries who said, we'll come in, and other individuals who also came in to help. And so it was a big moment for me. It was really important to kind of understand also the landscape and the people who were around, who really wanted to see this new experiment work.
Yeah, and it's I mean, one of the reasons why I think it's such an important experience is not only because it probably prepared you for all your future work, right? And the various challenges that one faces, even in circumstances where you have resources, but also because it seems to reflect so well the history of other biennials like the Havana Biennial and say Sao Paulo, that from the beginning faced similar challenges, at least Havana, right? But also that we're part of like a global South, like a deliberate. It is now fairly common to see artists from all over the world in Venice and in Documenta, but that was not the case until very recently. But in Johannesburg and in Sao Paulo and in Havana, you did see art. You saw an effort, right, of artists, the tricontinental kind of approach, but also thinking the global South through curatorial practice was several decades in the making, you know. And so I think what with all of the challenges, you know, that location of Cape Town seemed to me, you know, quite important to talk about. So how would you say did that take you to do certain things differently as co-curator in Sao Paulo or then later in Berlin? Did that experience inform very specific strategies for you?
So what you see there is a kind of a hall. It's called the Lookout Hill, and it's located in Khayelitsha, one of the townships of Cape Town. And it had just been built by, you know, the government, and it was built as a gallery, but it hadn't been used, you know, as a gallery space. It was used to host many other things, weddings, you know, and community. You know, it's more like a community center. That was what was needed in Khayelitsha at the time. I'm not sure what it is now. And so we kind of negotiated to use this as the center of the Cape 07 of the event. So basically the opening was not in the city center of Cape Town. You know, you kind of drive about, I can't remember, about 35 minutes to Khayelitsha. So this is where we kind of like brought people, you know, who normally would not go to a township, because that is just the kind of, you know, special politics that are around South Africa. So I just wanted to show these images. This is a work of Dineo Bopape called Naughty, sorry, and the spelling is wrong, but it's Naughty Boy from 2007, which was basically made, you know, like, of course there was a video that existed, but in our drives in and out of Khayelitsha from Cape Town to Khayelitsha, you kind of drive on this road where people sell different things, you know, even building materials, furniture shops. So we bought this cupboard on the side of the road on the way to Lookout Hill to make the installation, this installation with Dineo. And then there was also this, I used to take a train to work. It's very simple. It's a very nice Cape Town kind of train that goes to the city, and then walk under the Cape Town station, and there were like all these people selling different things, and this guy here was selling basically, you know, DVD players, TVs, and he would always have them on with different videos, especially Nollywood movies, the films made in Nigeria, and he was from Nigeria. So I kind of started a conversation with him to see if we could, you know, play some of the videos in Cape 07 in the lunch hour, because during lunch people would just gather around the space and just look at moving images. And so we had an event which came from the South African National Gallery, which was a space that we dedicated to video arts, but also to, you know, to kind of have a conversation about the presentation of videos in a place like the National Gallery, which was built in 1930 and was, you know, always a challenge to show video work like more challenging work. So here you see some of the videos of Robin Rhodes, Susan Hefuna, Kimang Walehulere, showing in the lunch time of this place. And these are the people who kind of gathered around to kind of also form their own narratives, especially with Robin Rhodes' work, which has these actions that are silent. And so this was one of the kind of interventions that didn't cost, any money or a lot of money. We paid the guy, I think, 200 Rand at the time. So I just wanted to show that as a memory of Cape or Cape 07. And also, I think it's quite interesting that also Cape happened twice. So it was also Cape 07 and Cape 09, and then it dissolved, which is something that interests me in the context of South Africa, that things somehow don't last. I think like you do it twice and that's it, or you do it for 2 years, and that's it. And
well,
so,
and I certainly sympathize with that. The very title of the series has that in mind. With the 2022, we're not going to do it more than that. It's not just the pandemic, right? It's also that is the experience of so many places in the world, right? That the precarity, right? It has nothing to do with creativity or intelligence, right? But the precarity makes these biennial events really, really almost impossible to sustain. Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, but they do shake something, and they do expose something, and they do, help some artists also figure out their grammars, of being in the world. So they were not for granted, so to speak. I mean, personally, this event really shaped my thinking. I felt after Cape 07 that I could do anything, even if I didn't have anything. That what you need is ideas.
Well, and also it's worth reminding people who don't know the longer history that what's fascinating too about, say, Johannesburg is how it catapulted someone like the late Okwuyenwezo, right? This one of the most important curators of the 20th century, who then did Venice, Documenta, etc. His first, big project was Johannesburg, right? That's what allowed him to do it, And so I think even just for that purpose, these experiments are worthwhile,
Yeah, and of course with him, alongside him, many other artists, like Tracy Rose, who was not in the Biennale, but she was working as an artist assistant to Kendall Gears, and I think the things that she saw there as a student, she saw for the first time, and she basically changed everything about around her practice, around her ideas as a student already, and we can see that.
And I see you have other images too. Do you want? Should we move to the other slideshow, or did you want to say something more about Cape Town?
No, there's that's it.
Yeah,
I can't say anything more. We can move on. I'm just thinking, what direction can we move?
I mean, I think it's up to you how much you want to say about Berlin. I'm sure people would love to learn more about what you did there. Or, I mean, in this series, we've talked quite a bit about Sao Paulo, and there hasn't been any discussion about the Berlin Biennale. So I think if you want to say a few things about that would be fantastic. But I'm also quite selfishly interested in that relation to your artistic practice, but also all the work you've been doing in South Africa, right? With creating spaces like the historical reenactments, but also the Nothing Gets Organized. I think if we have time to talk about that would be fantastic too.
Yeah, I think it would be a lot to talk about, but maybe I can speak about Berlin. But if, yeah, I would like to maybe speak about CHR, Center for Historical Reenactments, because I think it was a very important experiment for which the approaches in Berlin would be different. So, and also I think it would allow me to talk about why I call myself an artist.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, fantastic.
Okay, so I'll try to be fast, because CHR is also a very short story, but it's a long story at the same time. It's a project that lasted for 2 years, but we ended it ourselves. We were like, in line with like thinking about certain events, major events. So we thought of it also as something that is not permanent. It could end, but it can end by itself. And so we ended it after 2 years. And of course, there was a ghost of CHR that haunted. And maybe I'll get to that, but I'll try and move fast. CHR was, I wouldn't say it was located in the space, but it was located in Johannesburg. We happened to work in a building where I also lived, but it was a huge loft. It used to be a factory, and this was in 2010. These lofts were still very cheap at the time, and I remember I just rented the loft. I just come back from Bud. I was broke. I didn't know how I was going to pay for it, but it was because it was affordable because of the area where it was located, which was a post-industrial area. After 1994 in South Africa, a lot of businesses kind of fled the city and went to start a new city, which we called Sentin City, because of the fear, what we call the Swart Gevaar, the fear of the black. And some of the buildings around here were occupied, but this factory also, which was a building with different factories, had been deserted, and a few people came together to create artist studios there. And it's called August House. And for us, it was important to kind of foreground this window as a space rather than the physical space itself. So it's a space that we start with. So this, when we talk about, the local, or working from where you are or from the things that you see through the window, this would be an example. It's a project that I co-founded with Kimang Wahelulere and Donna Kukama, who created, this was our first event, which also had a performance. So these are kind of the remnants of the performance that they did in the space. And I like this image because it has many things happening in it. Let's contradict each other. I think it's open up for spaces of contradiction. Does this mirror have a memory? Or does the window have a memory as well? And one of the first projects we did was titled Xenoglosia, a research project, which is kind of, based on the idea of speaking a language or writing in a language that you didn't know before. It's a phenomenon. So it was a space to kind of also seek a language or seek a grammar to inhabit a space or a city or ideas or the curatorial. So I'll go faster so we can go closer to, these are like just part of the interventions or projects that we did. Nakuranza was basically a project that was based on what we saw outside of the window. And so it's a project that happened for one day in the corners that we see throughout the window, which was like this one of the buildings that was occupied, which had this pink elephant on it that we adopted as a memorial to a traumatic event that happened in that space, where Jito Baloyi, who we commissioned a graffiti artist to make a memory of him, was killed there in 2004. And so the corner doesn't look like this at all now. All of this has changed. But the feeling is kind of still the same. So these are some of the interventions of the day, hanging out these flowers. And it kind of stayed like this for a very long time. until the people were moved and some other buildings were constructed here. And the peak wall that you see below there is one that we painted in order to draw attention to the elephant, you know, as the idea of an elephant is like an animal which is said to possess memory, that has a memory that is big, so it remembers things that are happening here. So I think when thinking about the Berlin Biennale, I think the elephant is very, very important, and the pink is very, very important. So I'm just gonna go through some of the interventions we did there, which was like on making these t-shirts, which we also, I mean, we kind of borrowed from Superflex and changed it to fit the context of Johannesburg, you know, to kind of comment about the xenophobic attacks that have been happening against our fellow, you know, brothers and sisters who are Africans who are not from South Africa. And then giving them to people going to Zambia, which is a neighboring country, who come to Johannesburg to shop, and this area is a packing area during the day, and then in the morning they leave to go to different cities in Zambia. So they took the t-shirts with them, and that's where they are to this day. So I'm just gonna move because it will be a lot to talk about other interventions. This one was titled Fragile, where we kind of camped in a museum that was started by a photographer called Alf Kumalo, and which gave birth to this banner, which we took from one of his photographs that was in this museum, and we created it, and it kind of circulates in different platforms. So, and then I can go to to Berlin with the. I don't know if you have anything to.
I think it would be, I think that was all very clear. Of course, I think we could spend an hour on each one of them, more than an hour on each one of these projects, but connecting them is also important, right? So that's, I think, learning a little bit about Berlin and then talking could be nice.
So yes, Berlin happened in 2018, entitled after Tina Turner's song from 84. I mean, like, I think something that interests me is also how things that happened, you know, in the past or in history, you know, and if you bring them forward, you know, they seem like they're talking about the present. So we're really thinking about, you know, the spiraling of history, and sometimes you feel like you're just spinning in one point. You cannot dislodge yourself from a you know, a particular way of thinking, or how people think about you as a subject as well. So that was quite important for us in Berlin. How do we, you know, come out of this? And one of the things that we did, so yeah, just to talk about the imagery of Berlin. So you see the pink now, and the pink is very much connected to these experiments at CHR, because we started to work a lot with the pink and the gray, and there was something that Kimang said, and as we were like working at CHR, that he asked what is the color of history, and then we all agreed that the color of history is gray, and then later on we agreed then if gray is the color of history, then pink is the color of the future. So what you see in this Dazzle camouflage is, you know, is the history and the future, kind of, you know, trying to make sense of the present as well. but not in a, in a clear way, which is why it's a dazzle camouflage in a place that, in a space where we try to occupy, what I would call a kind of opacity, of saying, I know myself, I know who I am, and I don't want you to tell me who I am. And this is also kind of based on some expectations that we feel, in our practice as Black people, that there's certain things that are expected of us that are not expected of other people. I remember one conversation in a platform 4 months after being appointed as a curator, and the moderator just said, the name of your biennale is post-colonial, right? So kind of things like this that are assumed, that post-colonial looks like me, but it doesn't look like you. So it was also a way of kind of distributing responsibility, that we are all post-colonial, and we all need to take care of this mess. It's not the work of certain people, so in a way, with the Berlin Biennale, we tried by all means not to mention the word post-colonial or the word or the term decolonial. And not that we were not doing that, but we just wanted to see what happens if we don't talk, we don't say that we're decolonizing, because what is that? And it is a responsibility of everyone, whether you're eating your food or at home, and the way you talk to your children or your family. So that was the inspiration of the dazzle, which was these warships that were painted in dazzle camouflage, especially during the First World War. And the idea is that was that you can see the warship, like if you're trying to aim, but you're not sure of its direction, if it's going this way or that way, or of its intention. It was an experiment, but I think a failed experiment, because when you read more on the history of these warships, they were attacked more than the ones that were not painted. So, which also is quite interesting, because as much as we try to dislodge ourselves from these ways of beings, we also can get back trapped, because a lot of people are still stuck in ways of doing that, that may not necessarily suit the present. And those people are also in positions of power. They control how money moves. And so, like Jay-Z said, even if we win, you're gonna lose. He says we're stuck in La La Land. Even if you win, you're gonna lose. And for us, it was also important to start the public program earlier. And also it was a way to kind of help us figure out how we work together between the curatorial team and the team of the Berlin Biennale to start this dance, so that by the time the event or the Biennale opens, we are in a kind of harmony. So it was a space really to allow us to to step on each other's feet, and then until we can learn to dance together, the rhythm. And so it was very helpful in that way, but also to situate our thinking. So we titled the public program "I'm Not Who You Think I'm Not," and invited Donna Kukama, Jota Mombasa, George Shire, and some poets who are associated with Each One Teach One, which is a space and a library in Wedding in Berlin, which is run by Afro-Germans. But also I think our interest was that it was a library. It had information, it had books, many of which had been translated into German, books that speak about certain experiences of people from the Caribbean to the United States to the continent of Africa, let's say, call it the African diaspora. So by staging ourselves within a library also, we were trying also to dislodge ourselves, to say, listen, there's a lot of information about a lot of things that a lot of people are still confused about. A lot of people have done this work for hundreds of years. Here are the books, read them. Can we not start from the beginning always? Can we not always trying to start from the beginning, like once upon a time there was this and this? Can we start from a different kind of point so that we can dislodge ourselves from this spiral and kind of start a new wave, so to speak? It was, of course, important to speak to a lot of people in Berlin, because there's a lot of people doing a lot of work that is important in Berlin, and to also kind of not interfere with that, to say, okay, these are processes that are already in place, and we recognize them, but where can we situate ourselves? And this too also was a dance, because this ground was always uneven and shifting, and quite rapidly as well. So this performance of Donna, the not educational spirits, but also there's a lot of negations in the Biennale, because we don't want to be in a space where we say the Biennale is going to educate, the German audience about, their place in the world and how they should, learn to fix things. So it was also kind of to remove ourselves from being that, and from, trying to fix the mess, whatever the mess was. We also had a not a manifesto for the public program, which basically brought together different texts from people we were thinking through, thinking about, thinking with. And the Biennale happened in 4 venues. It was, also we were thinking about the idea of scale. And we thought, let's scale it down. Let's make, let's not have more than 50 artists. For example, in 27, there was in Europe, there was Documenta, there was Venice, there was Munster. There was a lot of these huge event activities. So in 2018, we thought it would be good to kind of scale down and really also focus on commissions and commissioning artists and creating new platforms. But also for us, it was also interesting. History was interesting, the histories of the institutions that we worked with, we collaborated with. KW is always the venue of the Berlin Biennale, and so we were thinking, kind of talking with Cynthia Marcel, whom for me it was obvious that she would be part of the Biennale. Been following her work and also waiting for a moment to be able to work on something bigger together. I organized a residency for her to come to Johannesburg. So there were these residencies. Somebody went to Brazil, someone went to Bangladesh, 3 artists came to Berlin. So this is a period of three months. So there were these kinds of residencies that were organized with artists and for artists, not so that they can go and fetch something to then bring back, but just to see how their practice could be rubbed off. Whether that became evident in what they did in the Biennale or not. That was not important. But then Cynthia told me about this work she's been doing, which she calls legendaries. She had taken these photographs in 4 institutions in Sao Paulo, an art school, an art institution, even an apartment building where I lived actually when I was in Sao Paulo, which is Copan. A lot of people know it. It's a Nehemiah a building, also a building as an institution. So what was quite interesting is kind of talking to the team of the Berlin Biennale, but also KW, because people like Gabi Horn, who's a director, has been with the institution, you know, for quite a long time, and to understand the history of the institution. And for Cynthia to come and do the portrait of the institution, which basically was a series of events bringing a lot of people in Berlin, and some were already in other cities in Europe, who had been involved with the starting of KW as an institution and the Berlin Biennale 20 years previously. And for that group of people to brainstorm about who they think the legendaries of these institutions are, but not only the superstars of the institution, people who worked in maintenance, people, you know, who are often, you know, not in the spotlight of the institution. And this is the portrait of Berlin Biennale and KW 20 years after the Berlin Biennale's existence. And of course, when I was beginning to work in the Biennale, one of the things that was important for the board and for the Biennale is to acknowledge that this is an anniversary of the Berlin Biennale. It's the 10th Berlin Biennale. It's been around for 20 years. But I'm one also to shy away from commemoration. So I was kind of trying to think what is a way to kind of draw attention to this, but not just draw attention to it, what questions are left behind for the institution in 2018. You know, if the institution looks like this in a city, in a city that is known to be diverse, you know, what does it mean, you know, for the institution as well? So it became, you know, that kind of crossroads, which is, you know, so the 10, which is the X, became that gift to think about this event as a crossroad, a place of contemplation where you stop and you think about, you know, where you've been and how you want to proceed, and to do it carefully. For us, it was really amazing to work in this very beautiful building of Akademie der Kunst. Although the building is from the 50s, the institution is older. It's more than, I think it's about 213 years old, you know. So, and with the vast archive of music, of architecture, of theater, of visual arts, of course, things that are impossible to enter and understand completely. But what we did is, you know, in thinking also about kind of silence past, was thinking about the Haitian Revolution as an event that was kind of like silenced, and an event that took place when Akademie der Kunst existed already as an institution, and to go into the archive and just to search and talk to people who take care of different aspects of the archive. If you just search Haiti, what comes up? And nothing of that time comes up. And so the work of Firalei Baez kind of is situated in that it tries to enter the archive by, you know, building this structure, which is, you know, kind of, the architecture is borrowed from Sensasu, which is in northern Haiti, which is a region of Haiti that is associated with the revolution. Combining it with Sensasu in Potsdam near Berlin, and the man who also had the same name, who was very instrumental in that revolution. So you can see that it has 3 entry points, and the idea is that you enter through it to go into the Akademie, the Kunst. This is architecture, you know, also was important for us to work with architects and kind of who also know the building very well, but who are not necessarily exhibition designers. So we wanted to find someone who's not an exhibition designer, who's an architect, who loves the building, who sees other potentialities of the building, because building has been around every 3 months or so. They change the exhibitions, and we just wanted to see if we can create a different atmosphere, but also to really stay true, you know, not work against the building. So there was certain aspects of the building that were not functional for a long time. For example, some of the windows into the courtyard had been blocked for like more than 20 years. So our idea is to kind of was to open it up again, to be able to be inside and also to see outside in the courtyard, and also use the courtyard as a space. And one of the things we did also with the architects is, you know, kind of like make people look again. There's a term for this in English, but English escapes me at this time of the day. So one of the things is these columns are not the columns of the building. These are columns that we created with the architects to kind of create this, you know, look again idea. Yeah, so this was another venue, which is called ZKU, Center for Art and Urbanistics. And I think, you know, looking at the 3 venues, you look at one that is very historical, and then you look at one at KW, which is like recent history, and this is even more recent, but also artist run. And so it was kind of like learning to work with kind of different people. In Academy the Kunst, we work with the institution without ever seeing the face of the institution, so to speak, because it's so, you know, it's so big. And so you work through different people, including the Department of Heritage of the city, who say, no, you cannot put this here. You can maybe put it here. It cannot be this high. It can, you know, and kind of negotiating through that. And so it was like different kinds of negotiations with the Berlin team, with that building of KW, with this building and its histories, and the academy also and its histories. This is in KW, a work by Dineo Bopape, also kind of changing the space completely. A work by Heba Amin, which was at ZKU, you know, because also we were thinking about the theme of the space, you know, Center for Urbanistics and histories of cities, and the dreams, you know, that different people have had about different kind of cities, and sometimes the most ridiculous ideas, you know, by different presidents of different countries. And Heba Amin in this screen here, she kind of takes those archives of people having, you know, big dreams about how, for example, how we can connect Europe and Africa, you know, to get rid of the sea that separates us and to solve the questions of trade. So that was the idea for Egypt, for example. And working in this very small room, it is located outside the theater of Volksbühne. It's a space that belongs to the Volksbühne, and working with the artists duo Las Nietas de Nono, who kind of, you know, were also for 3 months in Berlin, creating a space inside this, you know, small space which kind of existed on its own, so it wasn't connected to a bigger venue. Because for me it was interesting when I went to Puerto Rico, and I learned about their practice, that it was so located in the community and their personal histories, And it's very difficult to kind of think that you could, ask people to come to a different space, but then, the conversation was really thinking about what they, what could that mean? How could they mobilize other things that were around the space? And I think putting them in a space that is not in another building that is standing on its own was to give space for those kinds of connections to start happening. And then we also work with the theater How for a once-off event of two of a collective from South Africa called Getla Library, who created a whole music event, with new music. So they wrote the music, they had a procession, they worked with schools, they had a record, and also performed their experience, if I may call it that. And also, like, music was a thread that would, that went through from Geleketla. Tony Coates, whom we all know, had a whole basement, that is used as a party basement, where his videos with music was located. And
Nzinga, I'm curious how you, as a young curator, dealing with, for example, abstraction, but also even this idea of the X that you brought up in the Berlin Biennale, right? Like how to address the X and working in a context that has been purely white, effectively, in a city that is actually incredibly diverse, and how to deal with this difficult situation that one gets put in, So I'm curious, Nzinga, like how you, within your curatorial interest, what kind of questions you have for Gabi, but you may also have some comments, I'll step back and just listen.
Yeah, for the sake of time, I feel like I should just jump right into asking Gabi some questions. First of all, thank you so much. That was a really interesting presentation. I feel like what struck me is sort of just really the breadth of your work and how it's sort of really taken on various forms in various locales, and that's honestly really impressive. But my question is sort of about, how do you approach your curatorial practice differently when you're engaging sort of historical material in the archive? And what's coming to mind right now is sort of your exhibition All in a Day's Eye, and you sort of intervening on a collection versus when you're working with living artists for the biennales, and sort of along with that, what is your process like for selecting artists and sort of determining a checklist? I know sort of as curators that could be perhaps the toughest part. So I just want to sort of get into the nitty-gritty of your practice.
Yeah, thanks for your question, Nzinga. Yeah, with All in a Day's Eye, I think, I've worked with collections before. With Yvette Mutumba, we worked on a collection in 2015, which led to the exhibition A Labor of Love. But with this collection, it was basically filled with works that I never thought that I would kind of associate with my practice, but I took it as a challenge, and I thought it was really exciting because we could do what we felt. I invited 3 other people to work with me as researchers, 3 Black women, and it was important for me that they're Black women, because in the collection there was one work by a Black woman, and the rest it's mostly white, and historicized in a particular way. So it was kind of really, enjoyable, but also painful. You can imagine how painful some of these exercises can be, because they can go to your core, and then you have to question yourself, and try to do things that are difficult. And so it was that kind of exhibition. And as the title says, the Politics of Innocence, it was like kind of a platform to question, these works that have always been presented in this innocent way, of artists who were working in an era where like atrocities were happening all around them, and to kind of like, yeah, find a vocabulary to bring this through in a curatorial project and narrative, and also approach the exhibition as an essay. So there was a lot of text as well. And in terms of like, I mean, I can't answer your second question because I think I work chaotically, you know, somehow. I don't sit around and make lists, you know, which can be frustrating. I work from my body, I work from my memory. I have a way of kind of trusting myself, and my first rule is that I don't leave myself at home when I go to a place. I have to bring myself, and I have to look at things from my perspective. And if I look at things from my perspective, you know, then I want to see what kind of world one can create. I'm kind of inspired by the Combahee River Collective, and especially the statement that when Black women are free, it means that everybody will have to be free, you know, and kind of like thinking about it and trusting that, and seeing that what I do in, you know, as a Black woman will reflect that kind of freedom for everyone to feel invited in, you know, in a place that they didn't feel invited before. And so my curatorial work is not just to invite artists, but it's also, of course, to question the institution, you know, because I'm interested in institutions. That's why I play around with ideas of institution. CHR was, you know, an experiment in instituting. NGO, Nothing Gets Organized, is also an experiment around that. So I am invested. I don't hate institutions. I'm invested in them, and I think they can change things. And I think if you have an opportunity, and for us, it was very clear that this is not you're not gonna do certain things a certain way just because we're here, and then for the next event, you know, everything changed. There were certain things that are important for all institutions to consider, and to realize that there's other ways, you know, there are other possible worlds out there that, you know, perhaps somebody never told them about to call from Sanra. And so those things were quite important to us. And then artists come in this, you know, mixture of things, because they have been already thinking about certain things. Also, the idea of not leaving my obsessions at home means that there's certain artists that I absolutely have to work with, because they, you know, they bring me to that situation. They help to bring me to that situation, and so I have like a number of those artists, and some of them are not in the Biennale necessarily, but they were important for the process. And then you look at a certain point, and then you're like, oh, I have a list, you know. So I, you know, I didn't say I want so many queer people, I want so many, you know, this and that, you know, but in the end, what we had, we were like, okay, this looks good. What was important was like to really work with people who are working in Berlin also. That was very important, to tap into these voices that are there in the city. Some of them have been working for years, and most of the thing that was said of the Biennale is that the artists are unknown, which is something that is bizarre, because, you know, we know them, and they know themselves, you know, and they are known wherever they came from. Also, it was important for us to not have that biographical information on the labels. So we didn't have like born wherever. You know, kind of just destabilize the space, because we just wanted a Biennale that could make people feel something, you know, not necessarily healed, but I was always interested in a curatorial project that could diagnose a sickness, so that from there we can go and try and fix ourselves.
I feel like you said earlier that you sort of like maybe pushed against using decolonization, but I do want to sort of bring that term up because I feel like in thinking about sort of the history of biennials and international art fairs writ large and sort of their connection to colonialism, and this may be like a tough question that really has no answer, but do you sort of think that, or I guess, have you ever grappled with the question of whether it is truly sort of possible to do the sort of work of decentering the Western ideal or the work of colonialisms within these systems of power, sort of i.e. these biennials? And also, how do you see your work for the Center for Historical Reenactments and NGO as sort of working in tandem with your work at the biennials?
What is your first question about?
I guess just in thinking about the history of international art fairs and their connection to sort of colonialism, how I'm understanding some of the work you've done is it's sort of decolonialism in practice, and in that you're sort of decentering this focus on the white Western ideal. Have you ever, I guess, experienced tension with doing that sort of work within a place that sort of came out of the history of colonialism? And again, this is a toughie, so feel free to.
All places come from that history, all of them. I can't think of any place that doesn't come from that history. What we were trying to do, especially with Berlin, is not to direct our attention to whiteness, you know, to say, dear whiteness, this is how you can treat us, you know, to absolutely go against that. And it, you know, and that was interesting, you know, and I think it was successful in a way. And why I say it was successful in a way is I tended not to read a lot of reviews. I started to read them actually now during lockdown. You know, there's critique, you know, which, you know, some people that go to the heart of a thing that you couldn't grapple with. And I take that, I can take critique. And then there's other critique that when you feel like somebody missed something. And I think that's why I think in that sense, the Biennale was a success, is that especially not all, but like mostly white men would not find themselves, because they won't find themselves addressed. And we're so used in our work to addressing this, you know, this whiteness, you know, white supremacy in the ways that we work, which is quite tiring, you know. And I think it also pulls us back, you know, waste your time. Like Toni Morrison has said, that racism is there to just dissuade you from what you really want to do. So we wanted to see, like, if we really wanted to do things in a particular way, not without addressing, you know, this kind of, yeah, with whiteness, which is a broad thing, you know, because it exists also in many of us. And that we're so used in looking at the world in a particular way, that when it's presented not in that way, there's a destabilization that happens. And I was very much interested in the destabilization of things as we have known them.
I think several of the questions in the Q&A resonate a lot with what you were just talking about. And so I can bring some of those up, but something that also struck me in relation to your questions and how you answered it, Gabi, is that the kind of the overlap is the Center for, historical reenactment, but also things like, Nothing Gets Organized. What you said, Gabi, about loving institutions, right? About being critical of them, but loving them. And I think in terms of at least kind of my circle and those of us who've been doing decolonial or anti-colonial work, one recognition is crucial, which is it's everywhere, right? You can't escape it by going to this or that site, and you mentioned that already. But the other is that we just need to reconstruct institutions or construct them to begin with, And so while these biennials get all of the attention, I personally pay much more attention to, like, yes, we're doing this series, but these local experiments that are often so wild, so incredible, so creative. I mean, I was so excited to see when Rangrupa was selected to do Documenta, because it's crazy. It's crazy that it's happening, if you've paid attention to what they've been doing. And same with you, Gabi. Like, I love when the art world proves people wrong and says, no, actually, we're going to risk on this thing that has been done in this place that you didn't expect it coming from. And I find that terribly exciting, And so we, as much as we work on the critique and the decolonial effort, I think it's important to also celebrate those rare moments we get of victories, So, for example, one of the questions from the audience is from Elizabeth Brown in our PhD program, and has to do with how to work on that sustainability of doing projects in you say Johannesburg or Cape Town, with the funding, right? Funding is such a consistent issue, but that happens even in the South. Like, those of us, like Nzinga and I, are here in North Carolina. Getting funding for art is not that easy here either, So I don't know if you want to kind of talk about that, but that could be an interesting thing to address. And if you while you think about that, I'll look at other things from the Q&A.
Yeah, I mean, funding is critical. I mean, which is why I like to talk about Cape 07, because this was an important lesson for me, that you can have. We always need money. I mean, I don't want to say that we don't, but when we started CHR, basically we had nothing but ideas. In fact, we never applied for funding. We never kind of formalized also the structure. It wasn't the idea that we would formalize the structure so that we were able to ask for funding. What we did is just started doing things and just pulling resources together, and which were very, very simple, and bringing people in, but it was very simple. We didn't need funding, and then different people started to find interest in what we were doing. So in a way, it was the opportunities that came to us because of the ideas that we were exploring. But like sitting in, and we did a lot of things. It's also part of the reason why we decided to absolutely end CHR, because it was becoming a trap. Kind of like successful in a particular way, and which is why NGO exists, because it's also a refusal for that. It's very local. It's almost like a secret society, where we kind of like do things without that expectation that somebody will come from, I don't know, from Iceland and say, "Oh my God, can I bring you to Iceland," or whatever. Which was the case with CHR. I mean, I'm not complaining, because we managed to push our experiments and also our ideas. And in Berlin, the question of funding was always there. Because the most funding that I, as a South African cultural practitioner, most funding that I have had the most, if it goes by country, it would come from Germany. So to go to Germany and, for example, find that in the budget for the Biennale, there's a budget for traveling, for research, it excited me a lot. And I said, Tiago, let's go to the Caribbean. I've never been there. We can't do this if we haven't been to the Caribbean. And because this funding, they would never, they're organized in a certain way. So it's hardly the case that a South African would find themselves in the Caribbean through German or French or Swiss funding. But when we were there, we're like, okay, we take this and we go that way.
Well, and hopefully, yeah, I mean, I think that's a great, because it does answer Elizabeth's question, but also perhaps lets us bring in a final question. Helen Colton asks whether the work of Suzanne Césaire has influenced you. And now that we're in the Caribbean, I think Suzanne Césaire, at least she's specifically mentioning the text of The Great Camouflage, But even if we don't talk about Suzanne Césaire, like maybe we can talk about that location of the Caribbean as a bridge that has served historically. You already brought up Haiti in that great project in Berlin, but maybe we can end with some comments also, Nzinga, if that interests
you. Yeah, I mean, I would say there's I mean, the text that has influenced a lot of people is the Glissant text, Politics of Relation. And I think that's what the camouflage is, at least that's what we were trying to do with the camouflage, of saying that, as for our identity, we can take care of that ourselves. But right now we just want to fuck things up and have fun, and it's like 10 things around. So these places, these things that are in place, such as the camouflage, is also, it's a space of refusal. It's a space of different kinds of clarity, because also we get so trapped in language and the ways in which we talk about things. But if we, maybe sometimes if we can shift our vocabulary, something maybe will shift, So that's what we were trying to do, like stop looking at, how we look and who we are, based on your understanding. And when I assembled the team of the Berlin Biennale, I was looking for people coming from diverse experiences, I just wanted like people who have done things in interesting ways, because Blackness is diverse, and so I think it was also kind of to stress that we are not, we are not a single being. We're very complicated people who have crazy dreams. If we're not always talking about how unfairly we've been treated, we can, we don't forget that, but we can absolutely move forward into other realms of being.
Nzinga, I don't know if you have a last question or comment before we say goodbye and thank, Gabi.
I just wanted to extend my thanks. This was really an amazing event. And thank you, Pedro, for inviting me.
Yeah, thank you both. And Gabi, it's been great. And hopefully we'll have many more conversations in life. I'm,
I hope so, and hope to
very inspired by your work, and it's been great to have you.
Thank you.
Bye.